Welcome back to the podcast. Today we've got Dr. Sherry Yellin. She's going to help you unlock your cranium. Look, for those of you that get stuck up in here and you're not realizing that you're working the way your brain naturally works, she's going to help show you how some of the systems you've developed in life are working against the way your brain actually happens. Dr. Yellin, I'm so excited to have you on. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
You know, when we start talking about people and not realizing that our programming may be working against the way the natural systems of the brain are operating, let's really unwind that a little bit so people understand what we're talking about.
Yes. So really, you can work with how your brain works best and you can get better results with less effort, or you can work against it. And you're typically creating more pain, more drama, more costs, probably the very thing that's frustrating you or you're complaining about right now. And the bigger picture of that is sometimes it can take generations to clean up the mess that we are making. And sometimes it's just a lack of understanding. This is how your brain receives and processes information. This is how your brain works best. And most people know more about how their phones work best than how their brains work best. And that's the most important piece of technology and equipment that's coming in and out of our workplaces every day.
So what are the things that we're doing that we don't realize that are working against the brain systems?
Easy one is multitasking and feeling like you have to always be on.
Wait a minute. I'm an American. That's all we know how to do. I mean, I don't quite understand what you're talking about. I mean, you mean I have to do one thing at a time?
So what we know is that being always on is probably being always distracted. Your brain really can't multitask. Most people may have read something about this, but we're not putting it into action. So what happens when you feel like you're multitasking is your brain is actually just switching tasks very quickly back and forth. And errors go up, performance goes down, productivity goes down. And oddly enough, when you said, we're in America and we should be able to do this, we do wear how many hours we put in like a badge of honor, how much we don't need sleep, or how we don't take vacation time, we don't take breaks, as really a badge of honor. And the truth is, if we were working with how our brains work best, what we would recognize is that longer hours at the office doesn't translate to more productivity. It simply translates to longer hours at the office. We know that research tells us that after about 50 hours max of a week, your productivity drops significantly. So there really isn't an advantage of always being on. And interestingly enough, when your brain is always on, when we're kind of in that beta brainwave, that really active brainwave, that we are leveraging a system in our brain we kind of call the executive system. And while it might be a very task-oriented system, there's another system in our brain. The default mode network is what we typically call that. But that's really that network that's activated when we're more in that alpha or theta brainwave, when we're daydreaming or when we're taking a break or we're reflecting or we're taking a few minutes to take a deep breath. That network is where inspiration, new ideas, creativity starts to really emerge. So if we're always on, we're always in that executive kind of network or system, we're really robbing how the brain can actually bring us better solutions and creativity to whatever problem that we're trying to solve. So sometimes the very best thing, the most productive thing you could do, take a break or go to sleep, cut it off, get some rest. Your productivity tomorrow is going to start when you go to bed tonight. The quality of your day tomorrow will be determined by the quality of rest and regeneration, restoration that you get the night before. So I like to think about my day actually started at about 9 o'clock last night.
Nice. So let's kind of just unpack that, because there's a lot you put in there, and I can resemble that statement where we do a lot. And in order to really what I notice about my brain is, especially when I do great reading, when I'm in meditation, if I have one thought at a time, right, that brings my brain way more functionality, right? I'm able to concentrate, right? That sense of ADD that so many people, experience. I realize, yeah, I really don't have ADD. Our world is full of so many damn triggers that the more I act that way, the more I act that way, right?
Yeah.
And training to focus takes practice, right?
It does,
And
and you really touched on something that's powerful too, and in working with how the brain works best. It's realizing that our brain loves the familiar. It loves comfort. It's going to resist being uncomfortable or being unfamiliar. We call that in our practice FOBU, the fear of being unfamiliar, or the fear of being uncomfortable, or the fear of being unpopular. Our brain really is going to resist that. So we work with a lot of high performers, just like that, are people that are listening to this podcast, yourself included. And what we know is that always being on is something that our brain now associates with the familiar. And you know that you've really gotten comfortable with that. That's what feels familiar. Most of the people that we work with are really good at making everything harder than it needs to be,
well,
because hard
let's
feels
go back a
familiar.
second, because
Yes,
I don't want to rush over, because when I say it acts unfamiliar, or it keeps doing it, I almost say it's addicted to it.
it's
Right.
addictive.
I mean, like, there's almost like a sense that I have that what I do is I amp myself up so much in the morning, right? There's like this fight or flight mode I end up in, right, in the morning,
Mhm.
to get up and drive the company and strap the world to my ass and get going and get it go. There's literally the adrenaline and the go. I almost don't know how not to do that.
Because to not do that would be uncomfortable, it'd be unfamiliar. And the other thing, I agree with you, it can be addictive, because your brain is chemical, it's electrical, it's structural, so it's triggering a lot of addictive chemicals in your brain. The other thing that I would say is that especially high performing people have connected hard and being stressed and all those things with success. Because in previous experiences, maybe something has been hard and we were successful at it. So somewhere in our brain, we associated hard with success. Like, I can't be successful unless it's hard. And I remember being on a call with an executive who was in the middle of merging a couple of different hospital systems. And immediately after the excitement of the news that she would get to lead this initiative, it immediately went to hard, the stress of it. And I think we can all relate to that. Maybe you won a contract, or you got a big deal, or whatever. There's this quick moment of celebration. And then instantly we go back to what's familiar, which is, let's make it stressful and let's make it hard. And, and in our conversation, just asking her, what would it be like if you led this merger and it wasn't hard?
Mm.
And most of us, that loop of hard and success has been reinforced so many times
Yeah.
that we can't even imagine creating maybe even greater success if we don't make it stressful and we don't make it hard. And the other thing that I think about is, most of us can relate to this feeling. Let's say you're on vacation, you're on a beach, maybe on your vacation, and you might be there for 3 to 5 minutes and you start to feel really uncomfortable. You start looking at your watch or your phone because you're so used to go, 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 that to take a break from that is going to feel like a completely foreign experience. And your brain resists the unfamiliar and the uncomfortable. So what we have to realize is, even if our brain is resisting what's uncomfortable, that doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means it's uncomfortable. We should get curious about that. What is it
It's a good
about?
spot it's a good spot to look, right? So you're
Yes.
saying, yeah, like I'll give you one. Like, I can't, if I go through a day where I'm scrolling or on my phone a lot, if I sit in front of the TV, right, all of a sudden I'll be watching a movie And while I'm watching a movie, I'll scroll. And I think to myself, are you crazy? Right? But it's almost like an uncontrolled behavior.
It
Right?
is. And that's the interesting thing. And when you think about behavior change, or you're thinking about culture change, or you're trying to maybe get your team to change or yourself to change, there's no done. There's never a time where you could, let's say, run a program or a class and it's done. Behavior change will always be a moving target. Culture will never sit still. We can either be mindful and continuing to shape it and move that behavior in the direction that we want it to, or it will default, and we typically will not be happy with how it defaults, because it will default back to what feels familiar and comfortable. Another example of working against how the brain works comes in how we handle conflict. So what feels right in conflict, let's say you and I have a disagreement, is to immediately move to reasoning with each other. And I throw my reasons and you throw your reasons. And this is fresh for me because I was working with a client this morning and she was in one of those email exchanges where she's reasoning and they're reasoning. And the truth is, that's not how your brain works at all. If we were going to address conflict the way the brain works best, we would not start with reasoning. We have this belief that you can reason with someone, then they're going to relate to you, see the error of their ways or see your perspective, and then they're going to regulate. They're going to change their behavior. They're going to change their decision.
Yeah.
Anybody who's ever worked with another human being, especially anyone who's ever interacted with teenagers, knows intuitively that this is not how the brain works. And yet it continues in almost every exchange where there's disagreement. It's almost like going the wrong way down a one-way street. If we were going to handle conflict the way the brain actually responds, we would first of all regulate. Maybe that's taking a breath. Maybe it's moving. Maybe it is sitting down,
you're saying,
eye to eye.
Right. So hold on. So the brain wants to slow down before it attacks it. Now, sometimes I can't stop my brain from the reaction, stimulus reaction. Now, I don't know. Is that the training of it, the addiction of the reaction? Is that, or are you're saying that's not the natural way the brain wants to deal with things?
So it may be the natural way for us, simply because that's been how it was modeled, or that's been our prior experiences. So let's say you and I have a disagreement, for me to jump to all of my reasons feels familiar. And again, the brain's going to resist what's unfamiliar. But when we look at the science of how the brain really receives and processes information, what would it take to really increase the likelihood of someone seeing your perspective, whether that's in a negotiation or conflict or any situation where we have a different view of things? Instead of reasoning, expecting people to relate, and then hoping that they regulate, what we should do is go the complete opposite direction. We want to regulate, we want to relate, which is where I might get curious on your perspective. Tell me more. I might want to ask a few more questions. I might want to, at least get curious about how your perspective makes sense to you. And only when we've regulated and we related do we even have the possible chance to get to reasoning.
Well, it's just surprising because when I'm working my brains, when I'm doing well and I'm working out problems, I do it that way. But I feel like that all the training I do, all the meditation and all of the, kind of sitting down, the mind work is all designed to create that break, because without it, a lot of times my brain feels, I call my brain Fred, right? And Fred kind of goes crazy up there, right? He just, stimulus response. Oh, your wife said something. Rawr. Our kids say something. Rawr. Oh, I can't believe that employee did that. Wow. Right. And there's like a response that goes right at it. And I just notice that I guess I call it spiritual, the more spiritually, healthy I am, there's a pause between the stimulus and the reaction. Now, oftentimes I believe that I've got to train my brain to get there because it feels like it wants to do that reaction stuff more than it's naturally capable of. And I don't know. Sometimes I wonder, am I just training it this way? Is it just so on the, it's like cocaine, it's like just wants another hit of adrenaline, right? And sometimes it literally feels like that. Like if you look at the career I've created, I solve problems for a living. So every time that door opens, it's another boom, boom, it's another hit to hit, right? And you think to yourself, all right, that's a lot of pressure you built into your life. And if we've caused the life we're living, if everything in my life is caused by it's my matrix, why do I create that? Why do humans create that playground? What's the comfortable part of that makes it work?
Yeah, and it's what feels familiar. So, your brain is obviously an amazing piece of equipment, does amazing, incredible things we have yet to meet to even comprehend what it's capable of. But it also has limitations. And I think it's being able to recognize and honor those limitations. And one of those is that going back to that's what feels familiar. You have this network in your brain, and it's sort of like a super highway that you've been going down for a really long time. So there's no traffic and it's fast and it serves you in many situations. So to do something different is going to be going back to, say, some farm to market roads, some of those back roads that haven't yet formed the kind of super highway that we have for some of our other behaviors. And so what feels familiar, again, doesn't necessarily mean it's the right approach. It just feels familiar. And so doing something different is going to require a lot of mindfulness. It's going to require us to get curious. Like when you're triggered or you even feel anxiety, rather than resisting that's your body's internal signal to externally wake up and get curious. So rather than resisting those kinds of feelings, let's lean into them and let's get curious. What is this showing up to teach me? What is this showing up to maybe redirect me? Because again, what feels familiar, even if that's a belief that you're carrying, to adopt something else or to take a different approach, you're going to get some resistance because it's unfamiliar path. Doesn't make it wrong, just makes it unfamiliar.
Right, just unfamiliar. So, how did you start to break through and start to understand the neuroscience of this and how it affected leadership?
So I want to be a college English teacher until I became a college English teacher.
Now, what was the part of the job that you hated?
5-paragraph essays. That was easy answer to that one. And I had a friend that called me one day, and she was starting a workplace education program at a manufacturing facility. And when she said, I need someone, I think I said yes before I even knew what it was all about. But this is in the mid 90s, and started working with manufacturing employees, really who struggled to learn. And it wasn't long in working with them that I just wanted to unscrew the lid and look in their brain and figure out what is going on in there. Some listeners may be able to relate to that with people they work with or live with, And at the time, I was actually getting a PhD in English, and I wanted to know the answer to that question. How does the brain learn? Because if I knew the answer to that question, I could help these manufacturing employees learn faster. And little did I know that question would continue to haunt me 30 years later. We're still learning, that it would change my major, my focus, everything. And once I got into really learning how the brain receives and processes information, you realize everyone needs to know this information, especially leaders, because they are in positions of tremendous influence over others, but they have a lot of responsibility on their own shoulders, right? Themselves.
Yeah.
So, it's about how do we equip leaders with this information so they
Or just
better
people. I
manage
mean,
themselves, but then they become leaders worth following that people run towards, not away from. And sometimes just one shift in your approach can completely change your life. And it can completely change the trajectory of your organization. And it really does come back to understanding the most amazing piece of equipment. And companies invest billions in technology and equipment, and yet ignore oftentimes the technology or the equipment that is going to be the force behind whether or not the other is successful.
I just find it funny that people spend hours and hours training me how to use a software system, how to use, today we're going to use smart sheets, or this week we got Autodesk, or this week we got this. And it will have training courses and classes. People taught me the same thing when it came to English, math, and science. But no one really ever sat down and talked about my human experience, my brain, how it operates, the things I should know where was the user's manual for this whole brain thing,
Exactly.
right? It feels really unkind that, you know, if I could sit down and today, doing a lot of work, I can start to notice those things, right? I can look at, oh, look at that. You're trying to solve a childhood pain, or some of the stuff that I carried into, my like early leadership was always about, trying to prove something, right? I was trying to show the world a part of me, and, maybe who I is. I was trying to do it through the company. And that was a big part of that. And I could look at my reactions and behaviors, right? That were trying,
Mhm.
I could see them trying to, oh, look at you. You're just trying to be seen or known or approved of, and how that limited my ability to be with people in a different way. Like once you start looking at it going, I'm not sure how effective that is, but I get it. Like, look, I'm not mad at it. I think once you start to understand the way the brain works, I'm not sure it changes right away, but I think it starts to give me a chance it gives me a chance to start working on it.
It does. And in addition to, some of the things we've talked around multitasking or how we're handling conflict, a third really important point to work with how the brain works best is to recognize the number one threat to the brain is not speaking in public, or it's actually social rejection.
Oh,
So
for
this
sure.
sense of not belonging actually leverages the same circuitry in the brain that lights up when we're in physical pain. So if we were working with how the brain works best, we wouldn't create environments where it's us against them, where there's judgment, whether there's this hierarchy of you can't walk down this hallway without a certain title, because those places exist. But we would create environments where people feel like they belong. And I feel like today more than ever, we may be as disconnected as we've ever been, but recognizing that if we want to get the most out of ourselves and others, let's start from a place of connection. Because if social rejection is the number one threat to the brain, then a feeling of belonging and worth, and I hear you and I see you, is the solution. And so if going back to your example of this need to maybe be the smartest person in the room, maybe it's the person in the room that can build the best and fastest connection, which requires us to suspend the need to be right, to suspend the need to be in control, and rather to really level up our curiosity and to think about when you go into that next meeting, whether that's in person or over Zoom or Teams or whatever, to be the person in that builds connection, because threat to the brain is devastating. It impacts our ability to think clearly, to be creative and innovative, to see from different perspectives, which
Yeah,
is so
like
important to
it closes.
collaboration.
it closes the pipeline, right? I
It
mean,
goes into a tunnel,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
And you become completely focused on protecting yourself, being defensive, being right, being in control, all of that you start to see accelerate. And when you're seeing those external signs, it should trigger us to realize that's a brain under threat. So, one of the quickest ways to minimize that threat is to have a place where people feel a sense of belonging.
I had this great experience in Nepal one year. I was up in a monastery in this. It took me 2 days to get to Nepal. It took me 2 days to climb up this mountain. I'm up here with these little Nepalese monks in a silent retreat, and I had this experience of, what I believe was my higher power at the time, and I really got this sense that wherever we came from, we were one, right? And that ultimate feeling is um, I'm looking for that ability to. Um, I feel like that's where we came from, and we're having our first experience here on Earth is our first human experience being separated from God, for ourselves. Maybe there's a piece of God in each one of us. I could see each of the monks praying to each other. I could see the God in him praying to the God in me. I could see that, right, like this animal, this being, this this carcass I drive, being, the spiritual being driving this animal. And I could notice that, I wanted to connect, right? And now I'm having this individual experience, which is really amazing because we're creating faster than ever in this individual experience. And, but like, you're right. I think the most natural I am is most comfortable I feel is when I'm in community with others, right? The closer the community, the more comfortable I feel, the safer I feel, the better, overall it is. And being a human, sometimes, there is a sense of real uncomfortableness.
It is. And to think about it, it really does require us to set aside the need to be the smartest person in the room or to be the most interesting person in the room. To think about if, none of us were asked to be here, we're here. Okay. And as you said, this is our first journey through. So just understanding that one idea that your brain has this need for belonging, even asking, how am I creating a greater sense of belonging with the people that I'm needing to rely on to accomplish whatever it is that I'm trying to accomplish? That's maybe one of the most important things. And so you talked about this oneness, this connection. That's high performance. So what we have to do is what's interfering with that? And oftentimes that interference is the need to be superior, the need to be smarter, the need to whatever it is. If we could get more comfortable with setting that aside and realizing that the real thing we need to bring into this meeting is greater curiosity, it's greater connection, it's greater ability to relate.
Nice. All right. So now we realize that we're doing this. We realize we're working against it. We're multitasking is a first place to start. Let's start working on what are the next practices, right? In the CRANIUM framework, what are the next practices that we want to be working on?
Well, I will say start small and at least celebrate the successes, because your way of being, your way of believing, thinking, acting is really familiar. As we've mentioned, your brain's going to resist the unfamiliar. So what we have to do is we have to rewire. We have to relearn some of our reactions and some of our habits and even rewrite some of our beliefs. And that's going to take time. So one thing that's always underestimated is how long it takes the brain to learn when it comes to those kinds of changes. Now, your brain may learn very quickly a simple skill, like I can watch you touch a hot stove and get burned, and I can learn very quickly not to do that. But behavior change is one of those things that takes a lot longer than we anticipate it's going to take. And there's no done. It will be a constant
Practice.
constant practice, constant reinforcement. So if we choose a different response, in a situation and you see a different outcome, really pay attention to that. Really pay attention to your role. I'm a big fan of looking in the mirror before we look out the window. How did my response in that situation create or at least impact a different outcome? We want our brains to start associating those things. We want that different approach that at first felt really uncomfortable. We want that to become the familiar. And that's going to take time.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
I
it's
mean,
going to take constant reinforcement. That's why, when a company establishes their values, which is a very important thing that companies must do. You must be clear on your core values. That's in the CRANIUM method. But it's then, how are you going to constantly reinforce those values? Because again, left to defaults, you're going to wait, you're going to see that the culture is not moving in the direction that you want it to go. It has to be constantly reinforced. I think about that related to my own health and wellness journey. Over the last couple of years, I lost 30 pounds, have, like I work out
That's
differently, all those things. There's no done. It will be constant reinforcement for the rest of my life because we live in a world where to do those things is not convenient. It's sometimes not comfortable. It's sometimes costly and very inconvenient. But recognizing that if that's the outcome that I want to maintain, then I've got to focus on the outcome I want and not necessarily the task that I don't want to do in the moment. It's just recognizing that there's got to be constant alignment and reinforcement of the outcome that I want. And that's true whether it's your health and wellness journey or whether it's a healthier culture.
How do you get leaders to, reduce their resistance to create a culture where people thrive?
Man, I wish I had a pill for that.
Come on. Creating that, the problem is we're in a culture where it's just go, go, go. It's a, figure it out. It's not a very kind, based on what I'm learning here, our society creates this, ride or, kind of, I'll rest when I die mentality.
Yeah. Yes, I'm feeling sick, so I'll work harder so I can outrun it, is something that I've literally heard. Well, two things. One word you mentioned, which is so powerful, is it does start with leadership. It starts at the highest levels of leaders. And I've worked in with a lot of different organizations. And I do know this, if your top level leaders are not buying into the value of investing in people and the value in creating great cultures, it's going to be really challenging to turn it around. And it's not uncommon for us to even get a request from top leaders of what everybody else needs to do. And it's, again, turning the mirror around because it starts with the leaders. If the leader gets a cold, the team gets the flu. If a leader wants their team at a 10, they've got to be a 15. And I wish it weren't that way, but it is. And for some people, I'm not sure that they ever recognize the value of it until there's so much pain, there's so much cost. It's very difficult to turn it around once it gets to that point. In some ways, again, I wish I had a pill that you could, or a patch, that you could give people that recognize the importance of establishing their values and then holding their people to it and themselves.
So give me a little bit more on that. So how do you really build framework for that success? Is it that you create roles and expectations that are manageable? How do you track? Because in a world where I've got an idea, then I'm growing the idea, there's a lot of stuff in between the two of those that's hectic, right? It's not a linear walk, right? You want to grow a company from a $10 million company to a $100 million company. There's a lot of stuff that has to happen in between those two numbers, right? Or you want to get people to Mars, you want to build electric cars,
Yes.
or whatever it is that we're building. There's a lot between the two posts there. So how do you do that in a way that, what's the best way to do that for the brain? How does a leader lead in a conscious way with systems that are help people thrive?
So I love your example because I think we should be thinking big, and I think we should have a greater and greater expectations of what's possible. What I would say to leaders is this: if you create a culture where there's trust, where there's clear vision and values, where life is manageable, we're not asking people to work 80 hours a week without vacation, where you are involving people, you are engaging emotion, and you're recognizing this need for belonging. You create a culture with those things, which are the 7 brain-based strategies in high performance leadership. If you do that, you're going to get to that result a whole lot faster. An analogy I like to use is the analogy of plants. If you put them in the right environment, they're going to thrive. But you have to, first of all, look at the culture. We could probably go through a lot of examples where there were big, audacious goals. Let's just take, the submersible. That would be a great example of a culture that was created that was not, at least as far as I've read in the case studies, was not a culture of trust, right? It wasn't a culture where people could speak up and give feedback and get involved and share their ideas. And what could have been a really grand result resulted in a tragedy. And the tragedy was the result of not creating a culture where people could perform at their best.
All right. So if I want to create a culture where people can perform at their best, what do I need to do from a leadership point of view?
I'm looking at, are you minimizing threat purposefully and creating greater trust? And with every
minimizing threat and creating greater trust. Now talk about some of that. What does that mean?
So it's interesting because when I look at how threat impacts the brain, right, it's robbing of the part of our brain that allows us to bring the ideas and think forward and see from different perspectives. So the top 10 threats in the workplace range anywhere from the number 1 being social rejection. So I want to create a place of belonging. It's also things like a lack of meaning or purpose. I would say that the threats in the workplace or outside of the workplace even usually have 3 characteristics. There's some level of uncertainty or confusion. I don't feel like I have a lot of choice and voice in the situation, and I'm anticipating a negative outcome. So leaders can build trust by minimizing just those 3 things. If confusion is the problem, where can we give greater clarity? Greater clarity. The phrase, "and here's why," can sometimes give instant clarity. If I recognize that as a leader, then I want to involve people. I want to give them a voice and a choice where I can give people a voice and a choice. And the third, if they're anticipating a negative outcome, what I want to do is show the bigger picture, show how this is going to benefit. Again, the "and here's why," or here's why your daily task or what I'm asking you to do connects to something much bigger.
Nice. All right. So got it. So you really want to get them engaged in understanding why the work they're doing makes a difference, right? What's that effort for? And that we got you, right? You are an important part of this organization.
Yeah. And I hear you. And there's, that again, I've got clarity on direct as much as it possibly can. There are times where you can't give absolute clarity because, especially if you're moving into an unknown space with a big goal, the direct path may not be there, but where you can give information, give information. Not sure you can over communicate, but knowing that the word communication literally means to connect. So you can be using a lot of words and not connect. And sometimes you can use no words at all and
Oh
make an
yeah.
instant connection.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So connection
Definitely.
is key.
All right.
And
So
involving others where you can, giving people a choice and a voice, even if it is just in some of the smallest ways, is a way to minimize threat and increase trust.
awesome. Well, listen, I know you've offered our guests a free session to come work with them and have them come join you in a free session of cranium work, right?
Yes,
And
we,
I'm
we
excited
call it
about
the
that.
leading lab, and it really is a time to throw out an idea and figure out how we might be able to make it work
All right,
in our world.
so audience, don't take that lightly. Look, you got a free session right now, and we're going to put all the coordinates to that down below. So you'll just read that down in the notes. Click on the link, and we'll be able to set you up for that. So it's called the Learning Lab.
Yes, leading lab.
Leading lab, and that'll be exciting for our audience to go check that out. And look, take advantage of it. Look, this is a freebie right now. Take this on. It's worth your time to go really dive in and start to understand how you're messing up your cranium, right? To start to understand that you're
And messing up those around you who are looking for you to help them lead a meaningful life. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I got to tell you, Dr. Sherry Yellin, I'm so excited about having you on the show today. Look, to really start to unblock the brain and get that we're causing some of our own brain damage. And there might be a smarter way of doing this that works much, much better with our brain. I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, and here's the thing. At the end of the day, if you choose to work against how the brain works best, that's your choice, but you forfeit the right to complain.
There you go. I love it. You can do it or not do it. You just can't do it and complain about it.
That's exactly right.
Nicely done. All right. I'm grateful for that. If people want to get a hold of you, what's the best place for them to reach you?
We are at yellingroup.com is our website, or directly to me at Sherry, SHERRY, at yellingroup.com.
I'm going to have all that right down below. And as always, folks, thanks for being here. So grateful for all of you. Last week had another breakthrough week of followers, another 72,000 subscribers. It's crazy how many people we have on YouTube and Spotify and Apple. It's just great. If you guys could take a second right now and like and subscribe. We noticed that there was a group of you that made it to the end of a podcast last week that weren't subscribers. If you could do that right now, it means a world to me, the crew, and everybody in the background for that puts this together. So please do that now. And Dr. Yellin, thanks for being here.